Who are a few of just the most despicable criminals who do some of the worst crimes? Let's find out, starting with number 6, Weekend at Bernie's. Erika de Souza Vieira Nunes from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, attempted a crazy fraud straight out of the 80s involving her deceased uncle, Paulo Roberto Braga. Braga, who had a history of serious health issues, was found malnourished and suspected of being poisoned, according to an autopsy. His passing was initially identified as bronchoaspiration and heart failure, but further toxicological testing was pending as of the release of this video. But this isn't a story about the mysterious circumstances surrounding Braga's passing. This is about Nunes going full Weekend at Bernie's, a hit 80s movie about a couple of guys who stay at their boss's beach house for the weekend. But they discovered their boss passed at some point, but they still wanted to keep the party going. So the guys pretend he's still alive by manipulating his body like a puppet so they can enjoy their vacation. Yes, this was a real movie. Look, it made sense in the 80s, okay? There was even a sequel. Anyway, Nunes was determined to secure a bank loan, wheeled Braga's body into a local bank, and attempted to manipulate his hand to sign a loan agreement for $3,400. Bank staff, disturbed by Braga's unnatural appearance, quickly contacted the police. The video footage from the scene, which went viral, shows Nunes beside Braga, telling him to sign so he doesn't give her any more headache. She sounds really sweet, right? Nunes' actions, captured in the bank surveillance and widely broadcasted by TV Globo, included her pleading with Braga's lifeless body to cooperate in front of unsuspecting bank employees. Upon police arrival, it was confirmed that Braga had already passed for several hours. The authorities arrested Nunes for the obvious charges of fraud and messing with someone who had already passed. As of this video, the investigation is ongoing, with efforts to determine the full extent of the plot and whether other relatives were involved. Imagine being the bank staff, trying to figure out if this guy is even alive, and then what to say while this lady is talking to him all casually. We'd be looking for Sal Vulcano and some hidden cameras. Number 5, the UnGentleman's Club. Luiggi Canessa was the general manager of Shenanigans Gentlemen's Club in Albany, New York, and he faces serious charges. He's accused of orchestrating a scheme where unsuspecting customers were slipped illegal substances, charged up to $10,000 on their credit cards, and then were videoed in compromising positions with the dancers. Initially, Canessa was busted for selling illegal things to an FBI informant. Then, allegations surfaced as the FBI began investigating a range of crimes at the location. The investigation revealed that workers under Canessa's direction would slip substances to the patrons and then overcharge their credit cards. During his arrest in April of 2024, authorities found a bunch of illegal substances, 4 firearms, and $41,000 in cash at his home. His digital footprint on his phone included incriminating details, such as a suspicious list titled Enemies. On that list included the name of the lead investigator into the case against him. Another section on his phone had labels such as strip club escorts and side hustles. Yeah, not incriminating at all. The legal entanglements even extended to Canessa's financial transactions. Surprise, surprise. Where he reportedly handled around $250,000 over 2 years, paying out $110,000, likely in undocumented and potentially untaxed transactions. These activities only came to light after a tragic incident involving Tiara Bush, a part-time dancer who passed away under mysterious circumstances related to the club. Canessa somehow confessed during his arrest to selling from his home and admitted to significantly underreporting his income. In court, Canessa's lawyer, Jeremy Sporn, tried to downplay the allegations, suggesting that the focus should be solely on the substance charges, which he claimed were Canessa's first offense. He painted a picture of a struggling town rather than focusing on the criminal aspects of his client's actions. Despite this, a judge deemed Canessa a flight risk and ordered him to remain in jail pending trial, expressing concerns about his close proximity to the club and his potential influence over witnesses. Canessa faces a possible 40-year sentence if convicted, highlighting the severe consequences of his alleged actions. The guy sounds like a stereotype of every movie adult club owner, doesn't he? Like, you've seen this guy in movies, right? If we said, yeah, this is what he looks like, you'd be like, oh, okay, that's him, and he's definitely guilty. Number 4, the classic Ponzi. Aussie Jack Endersby from Perth was accused of orchestrating a large-scale Ponzi scheme, defrauding victims of roughly $2 million from 2021 to 2024. One of his victims is none other than his own grandmother, Lynn Newby. She alleges that she invested about $320,000 in his supposed trading company, Codex Investments, only to be conned. Lynn was drawn to invest after Jack promised her a steady 3% monthly return, but then the payments abruptly stopped. Lynn's heartbreaking story unfolded as she confronted her grandson in court, hoping he'd at least acknowledge the emotional and financial pain he'd caused. Instead, Jack ignored his family's attempts to reach out during the proceedings. Lynn, accompanied by Jack's mother and several other victims, watched as he faced 11 fraud charges. Jack had led a lavish lifestyle, bragging about managing a $2.2 million portfolio and enjoying luxury apartments in Perth, frequent trips to destinations such as Dubai and New York, as well as driving a Maserati. However, police allege that this luxurious life was funded not through savvy investments, but through a classic Ponzi scheme, where new investor money was used to pay earlier backers. The emotional toll on Lynn and the other victims deepens as they seek justice. During his court appearances, Jack avoided any interaction with his family, particularly ignoring his grandmother. Obviously a pretty cold move. As of this video, the legal proceedings continue, and the people involved are still anxiously awaiting to see if justice will be served. His grandmother showed up in court, seeing if he would look her in the eye. According to her, he didn't. Number 3. The Stepdaughter. Geraldine Leah Skevington Roberts from the UK is currently facing 3 counts of fraud. She's accused of financially manipulating her elderly stepfather, Donald Skevington, using her power of attorney. Allegedly, she snagged his house, worth £475,000, for a steal at £322,000. This deal stripped Mr. Skevington of his home, where he lived until he was pushed into a care home and the property hit the market again, now fully under Geraldine's name. Geraldine was also accused of liquidating £143,000 of Donald's shares from an investment portfolio and funneling a hefty chunk of his cash into various accounts in her name. By the time she renounced her power of attorney in March of 2019, most of Donald's money had reportedly vanished, spent on all sorts of various things by Geraldine. Geraldine's spending spree didn't go unnoticed. Her sister, Jacqueline Butler, concerned by the dwindling funds, began intercepting Donald's mail to shield him from further losses. Meanwhile, Susan Blacklog, the widow of Donald's late son, reported the suspicious activities to the police. This brought about the discovery of a dubious document on Geraldine's husband's laptop, claiming all of Donald's assets were willingly gifted to her. At the time of this video, the case is still ongoing, as Geraldine has denied all 3 counts of fraud. Be sure to keep an eye out on your elderly loved ones, especially if they have plenty of money and they're being taken care of by someone else. The elderly are prime targets for fraud as soon as their mental faculties start going. They're only ever saved because someone who actually cares about them is paying attention. Number 2. Take your daughter to work day. Mother-daughter pickpockets Tatka Dimitrova and Sofia Ivanova found themselves facing 18 weeks behind bars after they were busted in a clever operation by undercover police in London. This pair of Bulgarian nationals used a simple yet sneaky method involving t-shirts and bags to obscure their pickpocketing efforts, but were finally caught when they targeted unsuspecting shoppers, including a mother with a stroller. The British Transport Police, dressed in plain clothes, had their eyes on Ivanova and Dimitrova from early in the day. Their suspicions were confirmed when the duo tried to steal items from 4 different people within just 10 minutes. All of these incidents were captured clearly on CCTV, which later played a critical role in securing their conviction. Both women admitted to 7 counts of attempted theft and weren't only jailed, but also ordered to pay a victim surcharge of approximately $150 each. We can probably safely say that the London police treat these types of crimes slightly better than San Francisco police. Be sure to stay tuned right here to find out just what are some of the crazy crimes the mob will commit. Number 1. The church mugging. In Queens, New York, a shocking crime unfolded when grandmother Irene Taliamboris was confronted and robbed by Javon Prince as she was entering St. Demetrios Greek Orthodox Church in early April of 2024. Prince, who went after Irene from behind, caused her to tumble down the stairs, resulting in severe injuries. The injuries were severe enough that Irene didn't recognize her family for days while recovering in the hospital. Prince quickly stole Irene's purse, which contained her cell phone, credit card, card, $300 in cash, and car keys. He then fled the scene in her 2006 Nissan Altima. He was arrested 4 days later when he himself had a medical episode and authorities recognized who he was. Prince, who had previous arrests, including 2 for robbery in the same year, was taken into custody in a dramatic scene as he was placed on a gurney following his medical incident. The community was deeply affected, with many people feeling more and more unsafe in their own neighborhoods. Local officials and the NYPD have been under pressure to increase security and preventative measures to protect vulnerable citizens, particularly the elderly. The incident is part of a disturbing trend in New York City, where several similar unprovoked confrontations on women have been reported. But really, why target an old lady walking into a church of all places? Did Prince think she was heading into church with her purse overflowing with cash or something? Hopefully Irene is well on her way to making a full recovery. What are some of the scams that are done by the mafia? Let's get right into it. Number 3, the world's worst gambler. MGM Grand, a casino based in Detroit, was declared not responsible for a gambler losing up to $6 million in investor funds at its tables. Gino Acatola, the gambler in question, was treated like royalty when he gambled at the MGM Grand. The casino extended extra lines of credit to him and gave him discounted rooms and even free meals. All of this made Acatola so comfortable that he went on to gamble away around $6 million. But the casino didn't just give him discounted rooms and extra lines of credit. They also waived the right to do a background check on Acatola. If they had, the MGM may have discovered that Acatola was gambling with investors' funds. They may have realized that Acatola had no other employment, no other sources of income, and was living large off the dime of others. They also may have discovered his criminal history involving identity theft and grand larceny. But since the MGM was both greedy and lazy, Acatola had everything he needed to lose millions. Before Acatola got into gambling away investors' funds, he was involved in petty crime, even having a stint in prison in the 1990s. His more recent criminal involvement was in 2013 when he pled guilty in a Macomb County court to fraud-related offenses, getting a 10-month suspended sentence for his efforts. But that didn't teach Acatola a lesson. Instead, he continued to commit all sorts of crimes. He eventually met his Waterloo when he got carried away and gambled all of his investors' funds. You might be wondering how Acatola got these investments in the first place. Well, Acatola was a skilled salesman who could convince many people to loan him money for his business. He promised abnormally high short-term returns and claimed the money invested would go into commercial construction projects in Michigan and Florida. But Acatola was lying. A lot of these projects didn't exist, and what he was actually doing was an elaborate ruse. To perpetuate his lies, he provided his would-be investors with fraudulent emails, contracts, and payout schedules concerning the projects. In the end, he was able to source around $6 million from investors. Our con man didn't just try his hands at defrauding investors. He also tried to defraud his friends too. Acatola owned about 5 tanning salons in Miami. His companies used Interlink, a middleman payment gateway, to process payments. He convinced his friend, who was the owner of Interlink, to raise the limit for his processing credit card refunds for an allegedly defective tanning product. This meant that Interlink would process refunds for that product, and the tanning locations would reimburse Interlink. However, the tanning businesses never repaid Interlink, and Acatola managed to scam them for about $200,000. Now that Acatola had all of this money he'd swindled, he had enough cash to spend on what he loved doing, which of course was gambling with someone else's money. Acatola's casino of choice was MGM Grand Detroit, where they treated him like complete royalty. Surprisingly, Acatola was an extremely bad blackjack player. One would expect a fraudster to be better at gambling, But Akatola was a complete exception to that rule. He lost money all day long, and MGM Grand encouraged him to continue playing. The casino gave him everything he needed: lines of credit, discounted rooms and meals, and whatever else to make him happy despite losing money. As his losses began to mount and MGM Grand continued to extend his credit, it reached a threshold where the casino was given permission to access to his background data. Because they extended him a long line of credit, they could legally check his background and see whether he was worthy of loaning to. But the MGM Grand did not check, and as such, didn't realize that he was gambling investors' funds away. Since Akatola was the worst gambler on the planet, MGM Casino might have had every reason not to check his background. One might even say they had every incentive to make sure he continued playing for as long as he could. In any case, Akatola was eventually arrested and charged in court for his crimes. But this didn't mark the end of his crime saga. Despite being found guilty, Akatola managed to convince the judge to sentence him to only a year in jail if he agreed to pay back a large portion of his loot. The proposed 1-year sentence was below the 6-year sentencing guidelines that the judge ought to have followed. So instead, the judge offered a reduced sentence if Akatola repaid $50,000, but Akatola couldn't even find money for that. The judge eventually just gave Akatola the 7-year sentence that was in the sentencing guidelines anyway. While his victims understood that Akatola's incarceration meant they would never see their money again, they were also glad that he was paying for his crimes. Was our con man ever remorseful? Not really. While he gave a short apology in court, his victim said he hadn't shown an ounce of remorse for his actions. Number 2. From Russia without love. Alex Gallant was an auto broker who used straw buyers to falsify financing applications and defraud local car dealers. Gallant's scheme was to obtain money from investors and financial institutions through false pretenses and then use the money however he wanted. Gallant took money from at least 40 victims, claiming that their money would be used to purchase and export luxury vehicles to China. Gallant also secured financing from financial institutions using fraudulent documents and straw borrowers who were working for Gallant scheme behind the scenes. And he did all of this while on the run from the United States government and the Russian mob. If Gallant wasn't such a horrible fraudster, one might have been impressed by his ability to get on the bad side of the mafia and the law at the same time. He found himself in a situation where he could either accept up to 50 years of jail time with the US government or a nasty fate with the Russian mob. Which path did he take? Let's find out. Gallant was a man of many scams and schemes who loved to run his fraud through multiple channels so that he would have multiple fault lines. Gallant created a business called Timeless Auto Group to set up his scheme to recruit straw borrowers from around the country. These straw borrowers would visit dealerships that sold luxury cars like Range Rovers, Maseratis, Mercedes-Benz GLS 450s, and 550s. These dealerships would end up selling the luxury vehicles, and the straw borrowers would agree to a 6-year financing agreement with them. This agreement was usually brokered by a company called Ally Financial. The borrowers would turn the vehicle over to Gallant, who would have them shipped to buyers outside the country within a month. When Ally Financial discovered the scam, it had lost over $300,000 to Gallant's fraud. Here's where things get a little dicey. Ally Financial took the case to court, and it ended up being dismissed for unclear reasons. Aside from his straw buying operation, Gallant also managed to convince over 40 victims to invest in Timeless Auto Group. Unfortunately for those investors, Gallant didn't use the money to purchase vehicles. Instead, he turned the operation into an elaborate Ponzi scheme and used the money to support a lavish lifestyle. Gallant flew all over the country in private jets to engage in high-stakes betting at exclusive casinos. He also lived in a house he rented for $10,000 per month and paid professional gamblers to play for him, and then used whatever was left over of investors' funds to settle gambling debts that he had accumulated. This wasn't Gallant's first rodeo either. He had been previously convicted of fraud in a similar auto brokering scheme in New York, but Gallant wasn't sentenced for it until he helped the FBI make a racketeering case against 2 members of the Russian mafia. After testifying against them, he was sentenced to 3 years of supervised release. And it was under this supervised release period that he started this new straw borrower slash Ponzi scheme slash all-around fraud guy act. When he realized that the feds were on his tail during his supervised release, he fled. But Gallant couldn't remain on the lam, as the long arm of the law eventually caught up with him. His trial was conducted, and the court sentenced him to 126 months in jail. Number 1. Punishing sinners? Zane Kaiser blackmailed thousands of, let's call them, adult film purveyors worldwide out of about £4 million. At the time Zane got sentenced, he was the most prolific cyber criminal to be sentenced in the United Kingdom. According to the court, Zane's crimes were so extensive that the criminal justice system had simply never seen anything like it. Zane was just recently sentenced, but he was arrested for his crimes about 5 years ago. However, due to the complexity of the investigation and mental health concerns, his trial has been delayed. So how did Zane manage to scam all these investors to these sites? Let's just say he had some help. Zane first started in cybercrime journey by making money off ransomware attacks, viruses that freeze up the victim's computer until a ransom was paid. After a while, Zane became bold. He contacted the Russian controller of an extremely potent cyber attack tool with the promise that he would split his profits with them if his planned mass blackmail operation was successful. To further cement his operation, he also forged connections with Chinese and American cybercriminals who could help him move the cash without it leading back to him. Once he was done with those preparations, the operation itself began. Zane bought advertising space on sites and put malicious links on the ads. The links were set up so that people who clicked on them would immediately download some malware named Angler. If the victim's laptop didn't have great antivirus systems in place, Angler would deliver a virus to the computer that would seize the entire system. Once control was established, the malware would display a notice that told the victim that the FBI had seized the computer. The message said that the seizure was in light of the user's crimes watching these videos. In the same message, the user would be informed that if they didn't pay around a £100 fine, they would be charged to court and could be imprisoned for up to 3 years. This was usually enough motivation for most users to pay the purported fee. The companies that Zane purchased these ads from were wholly unaware of his nefarious actions. The scam was extremely successful and Zane made a lot of money. Law enforcement officials still aren't sure of just how Zane made, but managed a rough estimate of at least $4 billion. And what did Zane spend the money on? Well, he called himself the king, if that's any indication. He spent the bulk of his cash on high-end hotels, women, gambling, drugs, and a £5,000 Rolex watch. Most of his victims simply paid the ransom. Rather than going to the police, getting malware from an adult site isn't something most people want to admit. But how was Zane finally caught if the victims never went to the police? The simple truth is that Zane had too strong of a hand. After he'd been at his business for a while, one of the advertising companies he bought ad space off discovered that he was a cybercriminal. When the company confronted him, Zane antagonized them by threatening to harm the company's employees. Not to be intimidated, one of the ad companies reported to the police, in a rare case where the ad company was actually the hero. And that was when Zane's goose was cooked. The NCA got on his trail and worked with partners in the US, Canada, Europe, and the Crown Prosecution Service to track him down and arrest him. He was hit with 11 charges, including blackmail, fraud, computer offenses, and possessing criminal property. At first, Zane pled not guilty, but he eventually switched his plea and was sentenced to 6 years in jail. He was also ordered to pay back around £270,000 in restitution. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comment section what you'd rather have to do. Not leave the house for 3 months or have to not be able to go home for a year.